Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? Today we got to talk about the mathematical scientific equation for a 100-bagger stock. Yes, there is a mathematical equation that leads to 100-bagger stocks. And I'm going to share with you all of that in this video today. My name's John. I got options. Let's get into it. So here we have what a 100-bagger looks like. Ready? Here's the equation. Go ahead and screenshot that right now if you want. Put that into your books. If you're a stock investor, tattoo this on your forehead. This is what a 100-bagger looks like. It's revenue growth plus net income growth multiplied by buybacks multiplied by time gives you a 100-bagger. Periods, plain and simple. If you go enough time, enough years go by, and every year you have revenue growth, every year you have net income growth, every year you're buying back stock, which is leading to shrinking float, guess what? You're going to end up with a 100-bagger stock eventually. Now, we're going to dig a little more into what you need to know about each one of these factors of the equation to a 100-bagger. So the key factors to keep in mind are you want revenue growth greater than 15% is ideal. 20%, even better. 30%, even better. 40%, even better. Net income growth over 15%. Now, over time, let's say you get into a stock and it's doing revenue growth in the 30%. It does it for like 2 years, 3 years. Then it drops to the 20s. Then it's 15. Then it's 12. If your revenues are growing double digits and your net income is growing double digits, that's fine. As long as you can see that it's going to do it for a long enough time, you're going to have your 100-bagger. So I say 15%, but really double digits. So as long as you get in double digits, you're going to be okay. Just make sure you can see that it's going to do that for enough time. It's all about time, spending time in that investment. So buybacks, it's not just that the company has buybacks. It's that the buybacks are leading to a shrinking float. Okay, this is so crucial. Your buybacks need to equal shrinking float. What is a shrinking float? Shrinking float means that there's less stock to go around. So that means your piece of the pie is getting bigger every buyback that they're doing, because the buybacks is the way that the revenue gets to your pocket. It's the way that the net income gets to your pocket. It's by increasing your piece of the pie. Okay, so if the company is having net income growth and they're doing buybacks, then the earnings per share growth is going to be even higher. So it's going to juice your returns. It's like you going to the gym and then you going to the gym on steroids. Who's going to be bigger? The guy going to the gym or the guy going to the gym on steroids? So that's what buybacks are. They're steroids for your share price if they're done correctly. Now, the reason I'm so adamant about saying shrinking float is because there's a lot of companies that do buybacks, but it doesn't lead to shrinking float. So always make sure that the buybacks are leading to a shrinking float. There's ways you can look up online the outstanding share count, and you can see the outstanding share count over the years. Is it going down or is it staying sideways? If they're doing buybacks, but the float is staying sideways, then that's not doing anything for shrinking the pie. Now, how does that happen? Because they give stock-based compensation. They're giving too much stock-based compensation. So if they're giving $1 billion of stock-based compensation a year and they're saying, oh, we're doing $1 billion in stock buybacks, that's not going to shrink the float because you're canceling out one and the other. Now we got the valuation. This equation's great, but it's only applicable if you have a valuation that is not on the moon. So the price you're paying for the business needs to be acceptable. Now, the way that I generally like to look at this is a very qualitative factor. It's not as quantitative, but I try to make it quantitative by saying you want a PEG of less than 2. Okay, so a PEG is the price to earnings ratio. So you take the PE, the price to earnings, and you divide it by the growth. So if the PE is a 30 PE and they're growing at 15%, they're growing earnings at 15% a year, it's 30 PE divided by 15 will give you a PEG of 2. So you want it under 2. Anything 2 and below, I would assume is acceptable, assuming that you see that earnings growth continuing for multiple years, okay? If it's just a one-time blip, you see the earnings are going to shoot up 70%, 30%, but then it's going to drop drastically back down, then that doesn't count. That's not valuable, which leads us to our next point, which is you want time. And in order to have time and have that growth over multiple years, you need to have a disruptive technology, which means you have an S curve, all right? And then you want to not get caught in the hype. So you want to make sure that this is an actual disruptive technology. And the way you're going to know it's an actual disruptive technology, and it's not just hype, is that you're buying it at a good valuation because it has actual earnings, net income. All right, it has actual net income. If the company is negative, if they're losing money, the revenue is not growing, then you're buying into some hype, penny stock, meme crap, whatever. And they're saying it's a disruptive technology, but it's not an actual disruptive technology because they're not actually making any money. So they're not disrupting anything. So until they're making money, I don't really consider it disruptive technology. And I can wait because there's too much risk in buying some pharmaceutical company that doesn't do anything. All right, I'd rather buy Eli Lilly that's already bought the disruptive technology of Ozempic or whatever, and they're growing at 20-30% now earnings. Now, the way that you're going to know you're in an S curve, that's a good S curve, is you're going to look at the TAM, so the total addressable market. So always this is a very qualitative thing that you're going to need to look at, because you need to ask yourself, does this business have a massive total addressable market, and are they the one that is disrupting and going to address that market? Are they actually the one that's going to address that market? Because there's so many businesses that are hype, that are seen as, oh, it's going to do this, it's going to do that, wow, I'm going to make so much money, but then they're not actually doing it. They're not actually the one that's disrupting at all, or that disruption is 10 years away from even starting to actually be disrupted. So you want to be at the beginning of the S curve, but not too early in that there's no earnings. I have an example for you. So I have Meta over here, and I have some screenshots of some information about Meta. So Meta, Facebook. So here we have Facebook's earnings, and you can see for 2020, ending 2023, they did $14.87 in earnings. And then, assuming all goes well, they're going to end 2024 with $20 in earnings, which is a 35% growth. So remember, these percentages are important. But look, this 35% is not going to stick around. It's going to drop to 14%, and then it's going to stay at 14% again. So this is assuming the analysts are correct. You have 32 analysts, 61 analysts, 63 analysts. So that's a lot of analysts to make these assumptions. So and Meta is a very well-known business, so these are probably accurate. Obviously, anything can change with any earnings report that comes out, any new information about Meta, whatever, regulations. But looking at what we're seeing here, this is passing our metrics. We have double-digit revenue growth. Well, we haven't looked at that yet, but we have double-digit earnings growth. So that is very important. Now, the question you got to ask yourself is, what's the PEG? Remember this right here. So if we're going to skip this 35 number because that's not going to stick around. We're going to look at this 14%. Let's say they're at 14%, and their PE right now is right here, that blue line. So that leads up here. It's going to be at that 28. They're right on the dot. They're at a 2 peg. Okay. So obviously, a couple years ago would have been way better to buy Meta at a much cheaper PE ratio, but even today, it's passing our 100 bagger metrics. Now, over here, I have just the income statement, and this is annual. So you have total revenue. You can see we went from 116 to 134. Look, we're steady growing. Obviously, you had the hiccup in COVID here, but you can see we're steadily growing the revenue. Now, what's the actual math? So 116 to 134 revenue, that's a 15% growth. Perfect. We're right on schedule with what we need. So we got 15% growth. Now let's look at net income down here, 23 to 39. What's that? This is huge. You're at 69% net income growth. And that is insane. But that's not going to stay there forever because they did some massive cuts and job cuts and things like that. But here we have the next graphic for you. This is just another way to look at their earnings. So this is their earnings up here, and you can see the steady growth of the earnings. And you want to know the actual numbers, you want to get the actual percentages of the growth that you're having. But you can see that this is just another way to look at that growth. Now down here you have the revenue. You see the steady growth that we're expecting in revenue. And you can see in the past they had the steady growth in revenue. So Meta is a great business. Right here we have the numbers. So 34. Like, this is amazing. Then we have estimated revenue. Look, we're estimated to go from 133 to 158 to 179 to 200 to 224. This is crazy. This business is massive already and is continuing to push through and grow. So this is passing all of our metrics, and it's not that expensive. Here we have a graphic that's about the total common shares outstanding. So this is going back to our buybacks question. So Meta does do buybacks. I didn't put it in here exactly what the buybacks were, but you can see the shrinking float. You see the shrinking number. Now, it doesn't have to be shrinking crazy amount. It's just the fact that it is shrinking is very, very important. Now here I wrote out, this is a little graphic of what a 100 bagger is. So if you're compounding at 14%, it's going to take you 35 years to get the 100 bagger. 16%, it's going to take you 30 years. 20%, 25 years. 26, 20. 36, 15. The higher you can compound, the better, obviously. The earlier you are in the S-curve adoption. But the earlier you are, you better make sure that you're in the right company that's actually doing the disruption. All right. So what companies am I looking at right now that I see massive TAM, massive disruption that's going to happen? Battery technology, solar, renewable. These are things that are in massive growth, massive S-curve. And we're at the point in the S-curve where it's actually leading to actual business, actual earnings, actual money in your pocket. It's not hype, okay? And what characteristics, what leads to an S-curve happening is the cost decline of whatever we're talking about. So when it comes to battery technology on a chart, the cost over time is just steadily going down, all right? The cost of solar is just steadily gone down. So now it's gotten to the point where it's cheap enough down here for businesses to actually start implementing and purchasing and investing in those products. That's what leads to an S-curve actually happening, is that the cost of the disruptive technology has reached a point where it's deployable. Anyways, over here, we have a checklist, the 100 bagger checklist that I wrote. So let's make that bigger. You want the revenue growth greater than 15%. 15%, right? Yeah, 15%. Net income growth. We didn't actually look at the net. Oh, we did. It was like 69%, but that's not going to continue. We'll go with the earnings. I don't have the actual net income. 15%, 14.6. So we're right there, right? We're going to write 15%. Then buybacks, okay? Greater than 1% market cap per year. So this is just a number that I wrote. It doesn't have to be that. Maybe the company's pre-buyback era, but You want to see a company that's going to be doing buybacks if it's not already in the buyback era of its life cycle. Like Amazon, for example, isn't in its buyback era yet. It's still taking money and reinvesting it. Tesla isn't in the buyback era yet. A company like First Solar. So right now they're taking that money and they're redeploying it to purchase more assets, purchase more factories, employees, grow. So you want to see buybacks, though, greater than 1% of the market cap per year. So if you're Facebook and you're valued at 900 billion, you want to see like 9 billion. A $50 billion expansion of 2024, 40 billion authorized, which is around 28 billion was utilized. So this company is doing well over 1% of their market cap in buybacks. But that number is not as crucial. It's the point is that they are doing the buybacks. Okay. The point is that they are doing the buybacks, and the greater than 1% is just something to, you can think about and juggle with. The more important factor is that the buybacks are leading to the shrinking float. I cannot emphasize enough that the float needs to be shrinking for the buybacks to be effective, because that means your piece of the pie is increasing, which gives you, that's your steroids, your revenue growth, your net income growth. That's you going to the gym. But the buybacks on top of that, that's steroids. All right. Forward peg. This is the valuation question. We want to know that we're not paying a crazy price for the growth that we're getting for this great business. You might have a great business, but it might be trading at a crazy valuation. So then it's not worth investing in. There's other things you can invest in. If you got to buy it at 1,000 PE ratio, then it's going to take 10 years before you even get to a reasonable valuation for that to fill out. This goes back to like the dot-com era, when you had companies that great businesses today, but it took them 8, 9, 10, 11 years for their stock to get back to that 1999 level, because in 1999 they were way overvalued. You don't want to wait 8, 9, 10 years for your stock to go into a bear market and then come back, because when you annualize your returns over 20 years, you're going to be way less, way less than what they should be. So again, all this stuff, it only has any credence when you focus on the valuation. Operating margin, this goes to the rule of 40. We didn't talk about that much in here, but it's a quick metric, quick way that I look at a business to see if what they're doing is doing the right thing. So the rule of 40 is you take your revenue growth up here and you add whatever your revenue growth is, and you add that to your operating margin number. So your operating margin is different from your net income. Your operating margin is going to be higher than your net income number. Net margin. So operating margin comes from looking at their operating income. So let's do it quickly. Right here, we have Meta again. Now you take your operating income, 46.7 billion, divided by your total revenue of 134. Operating margin, which is taking your operating income, 46.751 divided by 134.902. 34.6% operating margin. Okay, so 34.6. So 34 plus 15 up here, that gives us like 49.6. That's well over our rule of 40, which we're shooting for a number of 40. So we got 49 for Meta. Again, check. This is just another check in the list. Your TAM, your total addressable market, your S-curve, percent adoption. So what percent adoption are we at with the S-curve? So with internet, with advertising, it's kind of a hard number to figure out. All right, with Meta, it's not as great an example for this metric to look at, but I guess you could say how much advertising dollars are spent what is the percent of advertising dollars that are spent in digital ads versus non-digital ads? Let's ask that question. That would be the TAM question for Meta. So in 2023, global digital ad spend is projected to reach 600 billion, up 9.5 from 2022. This accounts for around 2/3 of total global ad spend. Traditional non-ad spend worldwide is estimated to be 300 billion. So digital ad spend versus non-ad spend is already at 66% adoption. So honestly, Meta would get an X on this metric because we're not under 20% of the S curve, all right? When you're looking at the S curve of the adoption, this would be like 5%, this would be like 20%, 50%. We're at like 60%, 66%. All right, 600 billion is digital already and 300 billion is not digital. So, but again, right there, it said that we still grew 9%. Digital ad spend grew 9% from 2022 to 2023. So it's still growing, at a high clip. So, but to be honest, Meta's going to get an X when it comes to the TAM S curve. But the reason I do like Meta is because I feel like it has a long time frame to continue growing at this massive rate. And if they're giving all the money back in buybacks, then that's beautiful. And now they're doing a dividend. I don't really like dividends. It's a whole nother story. But that's what I got for you guys. Now, last point, I have some words about long-term investing in general. Long-term investing doesn't come without holding through the short-term pains. No pain, no gain. You'll know you're long-term investing when you feel the pains from short-term holding. It's another way to say the same thing. What to do when dealing with short-term pains in a long-term investment. This is important because when you're sitting there and you're investing in Tesla or some other business and there's some whatever news or something going on, the stock's not doing well, the market's not doing well, making your stock not do well, and you're like, do I pull out? What do I do? You got to ask yourself this question. You got to sit down. You got to meditate. You got to relax. You got to take a deep breath in, and you got to say, what are the very few things that make your investment great? Take everything else and ask, will these things fundamentally affect my great characteristic in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? So what's the one thing that makes your business great? Let's say it's Meta. Oh, they have all these users, and all these users are on their platform for so many hours a day watching ads, right? And other companies, other businesses, other people are spending money on Meta so that the users can see their products. So that's Meta's business. That's the great thing. That's the one great characteristic of Meta is that they have eyeballs. They have 1 billion something, whatever, 2 billion eyeballs, whatever it is. It's probably more than that. And now ask whatever short-term nonsense is going in the market. Is that really going to affect Meta's great characteristic in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? If the answer is no, keep investing. If the answer is maybe, then you need to learn more and stay updated, but continue holding. Don't sell. All right. Now, if the answer is yes, and whatever thing is happening in the short-term moment, and it's going to affect in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, the great characteristic of your business, then you might want to consider selling because that's a fundamental shift. But I wrote, P.S., do not come to a yes lightly, okay? Make sure you come to this yes full force, fully believing that something has changed, okay? It should be an alarming yes to qualify. Alarming, okay? There should be a massive change. Like the government comes out and says that Meta is no longer allowed to sell ads. Like just some crazy thing needs to happen in order for the fundamental change in the business to occur. Like I remember, here's an example. A while back, I was watching CNBC, and it was when Apple decided to stop telling in its earnings report. It stopped announcing how many iPhones they sold. And iPhones is that's their main thing. That's the great characteristic of Apple is, oh my gosh, they sell iPhones. They sell more iPhones every year, more and more iPhones, blah, 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 blah. And they just stopped saying how many iPhones they sold. And there was this one investor, Kevin O'Leary, and he was on CNBC, and he said, I'm selling all my Apple because, they stopped telling me how many iPhones they're selling. It's the end of the world. Okay. Well, guess what? That was back in I want to say 2016, 2017, maybe. Look at Apple stock from 2016, 2017. If you had sold it then, you're looking back dude, was that a fundamental characteristic? Was that something really fundamental to the business? They didn't say that they stopped selling iPhones. They just said that they're stopped announcing how many iPhones they're going to sell in every earnings report. No, it wasn't something that was going to change the business, change the great characteristic of the business. It was simply them not announcing anymore the actual nominal number of how many iPhones they sold. But what happened then was that they blew up other businesses. They blew up when it came to services, when it came to Apple Music, when it came to selling cloud space for your device. You pay a monthly subscription. They blew up when it came to AirPods. Didn't even exist then. The AirPod business is huge. But you see that it did not change the fundamental characteristic of Apple, which is that they make great products. Nothing really changed. But it was a momentary shift, a momentary blip. And you can't let some short-term momentary thing shake you out of your position. Don't let it shake you out of your race car that's winning. You're in the race car that's winning. Don't hop out to go hop in another race car because of, you need an oil change. No, you just pit stop, oil change, and then get back into the race, and you're back in number one. That's how it works. Recap, revenue growth plus net income growth times buybacks times time equals 100 bagger. That's it. Keep it simple. Just focus on these 1, 2, 3, 4 factors. So at the end of the day, focus on this equation right here. Tattoo this on your forehead. Not financial advice. Anyways, stay healthy, stay wealthy. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace.